You got a name?
Sharon.
I thought that's who it was.
Would you like me to tell you a tongue twister that my mother taught me when I was about your age? Okay, I will. Betty Botter bought some butter, but says she, this butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. But a bit of better butter could but make my batter better. So she bought a bit of butter better than the bitter butter, made her bitter batter better, so this better Betty Botter bought a bit of better butter. Would you
What
like
do
to
you
learn
think
that
of
one?
that, Sharon? Can you say that?
I don't think so.
And here's another one. Maybe you've heard this one before.
Peter?
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where's the peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? Went to school. The first time I went to school, I went to the same schoolhouse that my daddy went to when he was little. It was down the road from where we lived. And the neighbors' children walked across our yard, so I walked with them down to school. And our desk held two. They were handmade desks, and there were two people sat in each desk. And the first week,
Bet you didn't appreciate sitting at an antique desk, did you?
the first week that I went to school, the teacher gave me a book to take home to learn in Flandersfield, because my mother had already taught me how to read. She used to be a school teacher, so she taught me how to read. I think I learned to read by reading the name of the stove. Wood Bishop was the name of the stove, and I'd spell out the words. And so I learned my ABCs like that. So she gave me this book to take home to learn in Flanders fields. The poppies grow between the crosses, row on row. And then I place the birds still fly. I don't remember it all, but anyway, that was what I learned the first week. And we had a reading. When we had our reading, I'd go down front, and she'd have me stand beside the desk, and she'd put her arm around me and hold the book while I read. And one story that I read was about the jackal and the camel. And I read it real nice and loud. Only the trouble was that I'd never seen the word jackal before. And I said, the jackass and the camel. And I read the whole story like that. And she took a handkerchief and put it over her mouth like this. And the kids in the room all giggled. And I didn't know what could be wrong, but I just kept right on reading. And when I got home that night, I took my book home and I said, Mama, I read this story today in school. And the teacher wanted to laugh, and the kids all laughed at me, but I don't know what's wrong. And I told her what I had said. I read it for her. And I felt awful bad.
What grade were you in?
Well, that was at first. I only went to school 2 or 3 weeks. And so then I didn't go to school again until they built a new schoolhouse, 2-room schoolhouse. My mother taught me at home. She taught me reading and arithmetic and geography. So when I went to school after they built the new schoolhouse, I was in the 4th grade. And they had to have a certain number of pupils. They had 2 teachers. They had the first 4 grades in one room and the other 4 grades in the next room.
So your first schoolhouse was a one-room school?
One-room schoolhouse for all grades. And they said they couldn't have 2 teachers. That might have been the second year. I may have gone to 3rd grade. And then the next year, probably that was it, the next year, they said they've got to have more pupils. And so they took 2 of us, a boy and a girl, from the 4th grade and put us into the 5th grade so they could still have a 2-room school. I think they didn't after that. I think they closed it up and they had all 8 grades in one room. And then from for the time that I got through there, we moved to Albion, and I went in the 9th grade. I had my certificate. I could go to high school, and I was looking forward to going to high school. And my mother said, no, you can have the 9th grade in Albion, and you should go to school to Mrs. Weymouth. So I went to school to Mrs. Weymouth in the 9th grade, and I didn't like it.
9th grade wasn't high school?
No. And there was 4 years of high school after that.
It was 9th grade, now it's high school.
Yeah. It wasn't then. And my grandmother lived in North Palermo. That was right straight down the road and up the hill from where we lived. And she lived at the Four Corners. Ford's Corner, it was called. There was a church and 3 houses. And we used to go up there sometimes Saturday night. My grandmother would come with a horse and wagon and get my mother and I, and we'd go up there and stay all night, and then my daddy would come up Sunday afternoon and get us. We did that quite often. And you know what kind of a bed we slept on? We slept on feather beds. And under the feather bed was a corn husk mattress. And they had to be shook up every day, because if they didn't, they'd just have holes in the middle if you just settle down in. So you had to reach your hand in and shake the husks all up in the mattress, and then shake the feathers all up, and puff the bed all up. And then when you got in it, it was just like laying on a cloud, and I loved that.
That's where they got the poem from. Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Maybe. And my grandmother had a great big lamp that hung over the dining table. I remember that. It was a real pretty lamp. And I like to think she lighted that.
Kerosene?
Oh, sure. The only thing that wasn't kerosene around was down the road at Aunt Grace. They had gas lights in that house, but that's the only place.
Where they get the gas?
What would they have been?
Coal gas.
I don't know. But they had gas lights down there. They had a beautiful home. And it caught fire and burned.
Grace Arnold?
Grace and Charles Arnold. Grace Arnold was a peasant of my grandfather. It was a very beautiful home. And one day a boy was burning boughs in the spring of the year. A spark flew and landed on the barn of their house, their building, and burned all the buildings before they knew it was a fire. It was too late, and they lost it all. So then my father had a store, a real big building, and my grandmother and her husband moved into the store. Grandpa fixed the store up, made a real nice little house for him, and Aunt Grace and Charles bought Grandma's house up in North Palermo. Moved in there. Grandpa, out of that store, he got a little entry, and a pantry, and a kitchen, and a living room, and a bedroom, and a big storeroom and back. That was all out of the store that Papa had. So Papa was doing quite a big business at one time there.
So how old was you when your grandma moved in across the street?
Let's say something. 10, I guess. I think they lived there a couple of years.
Did she ever bake for you or tell you stories?
No. Not much of any. I know she used to be a school teacher. The only thing
Did she teach very much?
I don't think she could have taught very much. The only thing that I can remember of her telling about was boiling down sap outside. She lived on the Unity Road in a great big iron kettle.
Where in Unity Road?
One of the big sets of buildings on the right. One of the great big sets of little buildings up
Was
there.
that her home place?
That was where they used to live, yeah.
You
Her
don't know
father was a millman. Robinson. Bill Robinson was her father. And he was a millman.
Do you have a mill on the place?
I have no idea. But I just know that that was what he used to do.
Did she go to normal school?
No. They didn't have to. They just taught school when they, after they, oh, she did go to Freedom Academy a little while. I know that. So she did get more than just a country school education. She went for a while to Freedom Academy. That was an old school.
And that was what we called, that's who we call Grandma Sinclair.
That's Grandma Sinclair, yes. My mother's father died when my mother was 14. He had appendicitis, and the doctor didn't know what the matter was with him, and he died. So my mother then went to Freedom Academy for one semester, and then she stayed home, and the next year she went to Bessie High School, and she was in the first class that graduated from Bessie High School. She graduated in 1914, and I graduated in 1945 from the same school.
And I graduated in 1962 from the same school.
Mm-hmm. And Eric Jr. was in the first class of the third generation, I think, to graduate from Bessie High School. And my mother taught school. After she graduated from high school, she went to Castine Normal School, and then she came home and she taught school in Albion, and she taught school in Palermo. And she used to ride on the train from Albion, and they'd let her off at the schoolhouse.
The narrow gauge.
The narrow gauge train. And one morning she got up, and I don't know just what had happened. She thought that she'd missed the train. And so she set out going down the track very fast, because there was no place to walk except on the track, because it went right through the woods. And
This was about 3-4 miles.
quite a ways down there. And she must have heard the train way back in the distance. And she was approaching what was called Johnson's Crossing. And that was a very deep gully. And there was no place for her to go. And she got scared, but she had to keep right on going, and she ran right down the tracks across that gully. Then after she got across the gully, I presume she got off in the bushes. She got to school, but I guess after that she never missed the train. And my Uncle Lou's wife, Aunt Alice, was in the habit of, she lived near the train, and in the morning the train would whistle, and she would know it was time to get up. She didn't have an alarm clock. She'd get up and build a fire and start breakfast. And one morning she heard the train whistle, so she got up and built the fire and started breakfast. And then she looked at the clock, and she found out it was about midnight. That night the train had taken the basketball team somewhere down the line. And when they brought them back, the train whistled. So she thought it was time to get up. So she got up and got breakfast. My grandmother they lived on the farm there in Palermo. And after her husband died, she thought that she wanted to make a living for herself and her daughter, and she was going to raise chickens and make a lot of money. And every morning she'd go out, and some chickens had been killed. Now I can't remember whether they'd been taken away or whether they were laying there dead, but anyway, she made up her mind that she was going to get whatever it was that was getting those chickens. So she went out. One morning early, she heard noise out there, and she ran out and she opened the door. What do you suppose was in the chicken house? It was a skunk. Do you know what a skunk looks like?
Like a one.
Yeah, and they have a white stripe down the back. They have a big tail. So she grabbed him with the tail. And she came running out, holding him right up like that by the tail. And she was screaming at the top of her lungs. And the neighbor man heard her, and he came over with a club, and I don't know how he managed, but somehow he clubbed it to death. But her clothes didn't smell good, and she buried them. That's what you were told to do, to bury them, to get rid of the smell. And she had to wash her hair and wash it, and she was all smelled up from that skunk, but she got rid of the skunk anyway. My father was a storekeeper, and he used to have a wagon.
That would be my grandpa. Sure.
Grandpa Fuller. He was a storekeeper.
I used to ride around with him some when I was small.
I used to go to Waterville with him and ride the elevator, the freight elevator. I thought that was fun. When I was real little, a few miles back in the woods, there was a lumber camp.
What town was this in?
Ikey Quig. I don't know whether it would have been Montville or whether it was still Freedom, but it was over the
Well, you're
mountain.
okay. This was Freedom, Maine, right?
This was Freedom, Maine. He would, I think, once or twice a week, he would load up his wagon with groceries, and he had cloth.
Your father.
Yeah. And he would, and candy, and tobacco, and he would make the circle. He would go up to North Palermo, and then turn to the Belfast Road, and then go down back of the mountain. And there was a woman over there that her husband worked in the mill, and she had a little store, and he stocked her store up, and she'd sell things to the woodsmen. But that was how my father, he had a big grain room, a real big grain room. There was a lot of lumbering went on at one time, and he sold them in, grain for the horses. I think he was doing a good business for a little while there. But I used to think it was fun to ride around there. I just loved the smell of that new cut lumber. Oh, that smelled so good through the woods. And one time we went over and visited my mother and my father and I in one of those, they were little, something like log cabin houses that they lived in, because they were more or less temporary. And when it came night, at bedtime, the children went up a ladder to go to bed in the loft. And I thought, wouldn't I love to live like that and climb a ladder to go to bed? I thought that was like so much fun to go up there like that. If I had a house with staircases up.
Were there many peddlers that would come around in the fashion of your father going door to door?
I don't believe so. And I think that when he and Mama were courting, that he used to pick her up when she was home at North Palermo and take her around with him sometimes too.
And he did this how often?
He went regular, either once or twice a week.
Did he have more than one circuit?
No, but there was another place that he stopped, and that was down below Thurston's Corner. That was Overlock. You probably know some of the Overlock boys.
Yes, I went to school
To
with
be their grandfather. He had a little store, and Papa used to supply him too. And that would have been on the same road.
Where did your father get his?
He went to Waterville. He had a little panel body truck, and he went to Waterville and bought it. And another person that he sold to was Orange Rast. pit I told you about, and a few things like tobacco, candy, stuff
I
like
can
that.
remember riding well with Grandpa Fuller when he was selling out of his car. He had about a 1950 Chevy, I think it was. He would drive up on Bessie Ridge, and I don't know where else he'd go off. I can remember going by there's a Quimby farm down beyond the Reynolds. You know where that
Yeah.
is?
What was he selling there?
He just had groceries or something
Oh.
in the in his car. He would go around and sell.
I didn't remember that he did that when you
Yes.
kids were little.
Yes, I can remember driving
He
around.
just had to sell.
And I can remember going out to the wholesalers at one Winslow, one Hannaford
Yeah.
Brothers, and
Hannaford Brothers.
and
Swift?
was it Swift or
Armour?
Weston or something?
I don't know. And one time, Papa had woodcutters in our woods. They had a portable mill set up there, and Mama used to feed them in. I don't know whether she fed them every night or not.
Did they come to your house?
They came to the house and she fed them. They slept. That was after he'd stopped selling grain in the lower building, we called it, that he had built for grain. And he had that set up for a place for them to sleep nights down there. And probably, if she fed them at all, she probably fed them every supper time, I imagine. I don't know how many of them there were, but there were quite a few at that time. Probably wasn't for very long. But they had a fast-sized building up in the woods. That must have been what they went into for eating their lunch, because after Grandma and Grandpa moved into his store, made that into a house, Papa had the building brought down from the woods, and that's what he had for store until we moved to Albion.
Did he build a store right away in Albion?
Yes. Papa had that store. Although we hauled scholars too for a living.
Even though they weren't all scholars.
Yeah.
So he ran a school bus for quite a few years then?
In Albion, yes.
I can remember when I was small riding on the school bus. There was benches on lengthwise.
Yes, he fixed that up.
Wooden benches sitting back of
Yeah.
a panel body truck, I guess it was.
Yeah, panel body truck. Yeah.
Don't you have any things you want to ask your grandmother? Would they have steam engines that run the sawmills?
I don't know anything about it at all. I just know that they had the lumber, cut lumber up there in the woods.
Sharon, it looks like you've eaten too much. Don't knock this thing over.
And I remember one time when I was little that my mother took me and we went up on the hill back of the house and we looked off across the field and we could see Albion Village with the street lights.
Is that where you went when you went to town?
Yes. That was quite a sight.
Did you always have a car? Did you have a horse and wagon when you were little?
My papa always had a car.
What kind do you recall?
No, I know that he had. I heard him tell about it, but it was before I was old enough to remember it. He had a real truck that he must have bought, and he hauled the canned goods from Freedom
Cannery.
to
To the railroad or something.
Yeah, I don't know where he hauled them to.
Maybe Unity or
I don't know,
Albion.
but I don't think he had that big truck very long. After that, it was a panel body that he had, the first one that I remember. Like a station wagon with wooden sides on it.
Did you ever go to the ocean when you were little?
We used to go down once a year.
Port? See
Yes.
your cousins?
Yes, we used to visit them. We used to go to Great Woods to visit cousin up there too. We didn't go.
Up and back in one day?
Oh yes. Didn't go very often because my grandmother wasn't supposed to be left alone. so we'd have to get somebody to come stay with us, so we didn't all go as a family anywhere more than twice a year. I can't remember where we went when we went to the ocean. I know we used to go down there.
Did you ever go to Boston when you were little?
No, I never went to Boston until I was about 16, went up with Fred and Louise Fuller.
The furthest away from home you ever got was about Bangor.
Mm-hmm. Bangor and Belfast.
Sharon, please keep
And
your feet up,
Augusta.
man.
His papa's cousin, Fred Fuller, lives in Augusta. We went down there sometimes, too. Papa, he must have bought stumpage one winter, and he hired Clyde Young with his horses to yard it out. And Clyde used to wear a great big mackinaw, I guess they called it, a big coat that had great big pockets in it, and he had samples of flour and spices, soda, and baking powder, and things like that in his pockets. He said he was going to have taken down to Augusta to have it sampled. The people were trying to kill him, poison him. And he always carried a gun for this self-defense. Mama and I used to be so worried in the afternoon as to getting time for him to come home. We were so scared.
Your father worked in the woods with him?
Yeah, Papa was the one that had the stumpage and just hired him for yarding with his horses. Papa didn't once afraid of him.
Was Grandpa a sheriff at that time?
No. No, he was never sheriff until he moved to Albion. Didn't make any difference. His gun been loaded. Clyde had got the idea that Papa was after him.
Didn't you have a problem over there with somebody stealing wood?
I don't remember.
Put some dynamite in some wood box.
Oh, that's a story I heard Papa tell about. I don't know. That was another generation back. Somebody stealing wood. And someone put something, stick a dynamite, bored a hole and put it in it.
Black powder or something.
Yeah, something. I don't know. No, I don't have any idea who that was. I do remember hearing Papa tell about it. When the guy put that in the stove, it blew up. They found out who was stealing it.
Do you recall any other stories that he used to tell?
No, because Papa wasn't very, he didn't tell very much.
He used to with Aiden Turner.
He did with, when I'd go, he used to take me over to Ole Ward's to get my hair cut. And I'd sit on a high stool, and it would take the whole evening long. But I was such a backache from sitting there that I don't remember anything, that they talked all the time. That had been a place that got some stories. Because Ole would cut a few snips with a barber shears, then he'd stand back and he and my father would talk. And they just talked all evening with me sitting on the stool. He did the same with Almond Higgins' father in Albion. That's where he'd take me sometimes to get my hair cut. And they'd spend the whole evening talking while he cut my hair. And then one time, my mother was going to cut my hair. We were going to go to Chautauqua. And Mama thought my hair was too long. And so
What's a Chautauqua?
What?
What's a Chautauqua?
Well, the only thing that I can remember about it is that a girl came out on the stage. It was set up in a tent down back of Harold Key Store, I believe, the field down there. Chautauqua was some kind of a traveling. It was named for Chautauqua, New York, I believe, is where they started. And they'd send out these groups of entertainers. But as I say, the only thing that I can remember about it at all was that there was this woman came out to play the piano. And I was quite shocked because I thought she was wearing her slip. I had never seen a woman with a sleeveless dress before. for. It was just a plain sleeveless dress, but Mama, she's just, I can't imagine, she's just going to stand her petticoat. Well, anyway, Mama thought that my hair needed cutting, so she sat me on the stool, and she cut my hair. And Papa came in, and he said, "That's not even. Give me those shears." And he took his shears, and he cut my hair. And when they got done with it, it was up above my ears a while. And my mother felt bad, and I felt bad. And I guess we both cried a little. Then we got out there that night to the Chautauqua. Cleve Knowlton was there, and Cleve was the barber in town, and his daughter was there, who was about my age.
I've been to Cleveland before,
Up on the hill. And Betty's hair was cut the same style as mine, little bangs and short. And Betty's hair was shorter than mine, and my mother felt better then.
I went in there once to Cleve's, and I'd been working some jobs where I was quite dirty. He made some suggestion
Needed shampoo?
about me coming in there like that. I don't know what it was. Working at, in the buying a threshing machine or carting cows or something.
One of you boys went up to him and took your younger brother along, and he nipped the ear of the older one, and the younger one declared he wasn't going to let him cut his hair. Now I don't know which two boys it was.
They hired me once to work in their garden.
Please?
Well, Mrs. Knowlton.
Gladys.
I don't know whether the seeds ever came up or not. I don't think they got me back next year. Do you remember any other traveling shows or snake oil sellers or anything that would come around?
No, we never had anybody like that, but I do remember one Sunday when we were up to North Palermo, up to Grandma's. They're saying that there's a load of gypsies, not a load, and that had been like probably a hayrack with them, and they're good. And I remember they're saying that they were gypsies. That's the only people.
Were they entertainers?
No, they were just traveling through. Now let's see, they would go to Belfast by there. I don't know where they would have been coming from.
Would that have been the road to Belfast before they had a road through freedom? A paved road through freedom?
Well, it was a good road. It would have been a good road through to Belfast.
So people traveling from Wyville to Belfast might have gone through.
They might have gone through that way. But that's the only time that I remember of ever anybody like that. They talked about hobos, but you see, there was nobody came through our way at all. But I do remember that one time. I don't remember. I was so small. I don't remember what they looked like or anything. But I'm sure it was a hayrack that they had with everything on it.
But you used to play with them. You were the toys, dolls, whatever.
Since I was old enough to read, I read all the time.
You didn't watch TV?
No, I rather read.
Did you have electricity even in town? When did you have power?
Well, no, but I told you I was small when they put the streetlights in Albion. But we never had any electricity at all until we had it put in the house after we moved to Albion.
Because we didn't have any when I was little either on Bar Road.
No.
There was kind of things. There was a big button attached with a piece of string.
Oh, pull it.
Pull it.
Yeah.
Did your father make you toys?
No, I was quite small, and of course I was really excited over Lindbergh flying, and I wanted to grow up and be a flyer. I felt bad, think I was a girl, and I know he bought me an airplane that all the pieces, metal pieces, put together to make an airplane, and make a biplane out of it even. It was like supposed to be like Lindbergh's. I remember Papa's, the night that Lindbergh flew, the night he was supposed to have landed, my grandmother was Fuller was talking to Uncle Rob, and I remember Papa saying, "Ask him if that fellow's landed yet."
You didn't have a radio?
Apparently we didn't at that time, but we used to have radio, and when you're listening to it, you'd hear squeals. And they'd say, "That's Pearlie Thurston tuning in on his radio." So there couldn't have been very many radios around.
Did you have a telephone?
Always had telephone. And before I can remember, um, Fred Greeley and his daughter Maud. She was supposed to be a singer. Oh, she played the piano. They both of them sang. And they should have been on Hee Haw.
In a church or
No.
in the house?
Yeah. And I don't know whether they did it regular or not, but people would take, Mama told me about this, people would take down their receivers and they'd put on an entertainment of singing and playing. And it really was something out of this world.
Did you ever hear them?
No, but I'd heard Fred sing,
Okay.
because he always wanted to. When we had school programs, why they always would ask him to sing, Kids loved to hear
An
him.
adult would come up and sing for the kids.
Yeah. But
Character.
he was a real character. And there was another fellow, Billy Arnold, that liked to recite poetry, and they'd always get him if he was at the school program, Bach Social.
Did he do a good job?
Yes, and he recited one, and I have thought about that one so much. The only thing that I can remember about it, and this is a poem that it would be interesting if anybody could get hold of, but I remember that there was the line that came up in it every so often. It was about Podauga days, as I remember it, and it was about the way things used to be, Well, of course, he was probably 80 then, or 90. But it was a long poem, and I remember his reciting that one, about how things were in Podauga days, is the way I remember it. I don't know what the word is. It's something that I never could find. Anything sounded like it. But he loved to be asked to recite, like Fred loved to sing. One time, Fred was working on the road, and at noontime, who could have played piano? He must have sung without any music, because I remember the kids hollering for him to come in and sing for us.
This was at school?
At school. For our drinking water at school, we had to take a pail. I guess the boys probably was the ones that did it, and went up the road to a spring, and they'd dip the pail in the spring and bring the water back and put it in the big jug, and that's what we had for drinking water.
I used to do that for my grandmother. I used to had a bucket on a rope, we dropped down the well.
That was in a well, but this was a
Grandma
spring where they got that drinking water from school. And probably we all drank out of the same cup. Unless my mother gave me a cup. I had a little folding cup. I think maybe she gave me that and told me to use that to drink. Well, I remember one thing I used to like to do. I used to like to play train. I'd line the chairs all up together, put a blanket over them, 2 or 3 chairs, and I had a little dinner box, and I'd put my mother would take a cookie and cut it up in little pieces, and I'd take that for my lunch to have on the train when I went for a ride.
Did you ever ride on a rail train when you were little?
No, the only thing that I ever rode on was a streetcar when I was little. One time we went to Waterville Fair. See, this had to be before I was 5, because Hilda hadn't arrived. And we left the car down by Pillsbury's, I think. That was Fairfield, wasn't it, Pillsbury's?
It was just inside
Waterville?
Waterville, because it was just the other side of Kai. So
Okay, side.
I worked out there for a while, with John Barton when those were doing repairs and filters.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm very sure that it was in their parking lot that Papa left the car, and we got on the streetcar and went out to the fair. I don't remember anything about the fair, but I do remember riding the streetcar. But I never rode on any public transportation again until the time I went up to Boston, Massachusetts, when I was about 16, and Florence Fuller took me into Boston on the train, and we went into Eileen's, I believe it was, and went upstairs, and they had a restaurant there. They called it the Salad Bar, and I had the first cinnamon roll that I ever saw in my life.
Was it Easter time?
Well, I think regular probably, regular fare probably. Rolls to go with salad. That was the first cinnamon roll. I remember that one. Then after we came to Albion, I used to be a good friend of Henry Taylor's daughter, and Henry used to go around every once a week, and he gathered up butter and eggs and took them to Waterville. And she used to come down ride down with him while he went gathering them up, and she and I went down the stream and walked down the stream. It's so pretty down there.
That's where Malin Fuller lived.
Mm-hmm. I know one day we got way down there. It was deep gorges like.
Down where the rips are.
I don't know what it's called.
It's very pretty down
I
there.
always wanted to take your kids.
We've been there. That's you go suckering. That's where we used to go. We went suckering down back at Coulson's.
I know I always wanted to take you kids and pack a picnic lunch and walk down there.
That would make a good.
There never was any time that I could.
Park down there, County Park or something.
Beautiful.
The stream makes a sharp turn from the gorge, and it goes flat for ways, and it goes down through the falls, follows the rips. Yeah, I worked when I worked with Perkins, because his little barn was across the field from there.
Yeah, we saw that day.
Yes, right. They used to send me down to the. I guess they kept livestock, maybe young ones, or maybe dry ones down there.
Yeah.
And I used to have to go down in the winter to the little barn. I don't know, they'd give me the tractor to drive down, and I'd go down and feed the cattle down there.
But I thought that was so pretty that day we went down there.
It'd be a nice place to have a house down there.
It's funny, I was talking to Thelma about it a couple of years ago. I went down and visited her, and I asked her if she remembered. She didn't even remember. And she used to come every day, every week, one day.
Do you remember you coming over?
She didn't remember I going down, walking down the stream. We used to just go down there, walk down that stream.
Did you tell once about some person who remembered Indians coming out on the stream?
Yes, that's what Mrs. Whiting said, that her mother said, that she remembered us going down to the stream to get water, and there being an Indian woman down there getting water.
But now where did Mrs. Whiting live?
At Merritt Chalmers' place.
Which was?
Right, that's where Malin finally moved
Malin's
into.
place.
Yeah.
And they had some sort of a.
That had to have been one of the oldest houses in town.
Didn't they have a grist mill or something there at one time? Or?
I think so.
So how old was Mrs. Whiting? Did she tell you this story, or she told you heard her say that?
Yes.
About when and what? How old were you and how old
Well,
was she?
you see, I would have been about 12, and she would probably been about 70.
But you'd seen Indians nearby her house, presumably.
That's what her mother said.
More than one, or just one time?
No, she said she just saw this Indian woman down there when she went down to get water.
One time. What was the Indian woman was getting water also?
Yeah, that's what as I remember her telling it. They had to have been living not far away. Might have been traveling through, of course, from one place to another. It might not have had, if there'd been any settlement or anything, she would have known about that and told about it.
This car is red.
think of anything else to ask your grandma? You suppose she had a favorite doll when she was your size, or stuffed
Yes,
animal?
I had a doll that had its mouth open, and I stuffed molasses cookies in it, little pieces. And after a while, my doll rattled.
It must have been China.
No, it wasn't Chinese too. I don't know what they were made of. It wasn't China. Then I had another doll, and I've never seen in any of the antique places. I've often thought I should see one like it. It was wound up. I mean, you wound it up. It had gears, and it had a skirt that came down to the floor, and you wind it up, and it would go across the floor. And I had that when I was little, but my eye caught the whooping cough the day that my baby sister was born, and my mother burned up about everything that I had. She was so scared. I don't blame her, because I had two little cousins that died that winter of whooping cough. Up to great work. But the day that she was born, she was born in North Palumbo, and Papa asked Uncle Rob to come down and bring Erwin, was Frank and Erwin down. Erwin was my age, to play with me, because I didn't want to be away from my mama. I always wanted to be with my mama. And he was coming down whooping cough, and we didn't know it, and I caught it that day. And of course I was going in to see my baby sister up until the time that we found out that he had whooping cough, and I was terribly sick. So Mama just burned up everything that I had. She didn't try to disinfect anything. So I think that doll went that time. Erwin and I tore down an old chicken house one time when he was over there visiting. And underneath the shingles were old newspapers. And I remember on one of the newspapers reading where I think it was Grover Cleveland's wife had taken a new baby out for a stroll in the carriage. It was all underneath all those shingles was all old
Did you
newspapers.
get a newspaper when you were young?
Yes, Papa had. He got the Bangor Daily News, the Kennebec Journal, and the Waterbury Sentinel.
Did they come weekly or daily?
Oh, they all came daily, and then he got the Boston paper once a week.
He had quite a newspaper bill, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Did your mother work out any?
No, she had to stay home, take care of Granny, be with Granny. She never worked out from the time she was married until she went to work for Ina Chalmers' mother. Ina got to go over there and help her mother, and that was
Venus Foss?
Geneva Foss.
Oh, yeah, she was still alive when she was like one of the oldest people in town, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Up on Foss Hill.
And that made a good chance for Mama to go over there, I think 2 or 3 times a week.
Sure, no, you're on TV, right? Okay.
And so she went over there and worked, but she'd always been home. But Mama she did crocheting all the time.
I can remember we went over there, or I went over to the house with somebody one time. I don't have any idea, but we went over there for Foss Hill. Who did crochet? Your mother?
Yeah, she used to do crochet work. You bought the yarn
For herself?
from New York. No. It was what do you call it, a cottage project. You bought the yarn in skeins, and then you had to unwind it, and they'd send a pattern of either booties or jackets or bonnets.
All kids, infants' clothing.
Infants' clothing. And they paid you so much for making, like we got 5 cents a piece for making bonnets. We get 25 cents a dozen for making just little short booties.
Was there any money at all, I suppose, if somebody was good at that?
Yes.
Sharon, please keep your feet up. That might make a noise in the microphone.
Yeah.
Did many ladies do that?
I have no idea. I know that my mother and my grandmother did. That's all I know.
Which grandmother?
Grandma Sinclair.
And they mailed them off and got money back in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have much of a garden? Did you grow and can most of your food?
I don't remember too much about the garden, but we had to have.
You didn't have to go out and pull weeds in it, did you?
No. I know my grandfather and grandmother always had a good garden. I can't remember too much about ours. See, I was 12 when we left South Freda and moved to Albion. My grandmother died in August, and we moved the next 4th of July when we moved into the house in Albion. My father had cows, and
In Freedom.
in Freedom, and he had hay fever so bad he had to sell them all. And he sold them to the man that lived, Howard. Well, he was a brother to Mrs. You used to work for. The little house where summer place where you used to work.
Oh,
Edsel.
okay.
Clarence Howard.
Yeah, okay.
He was a brother to Mrs.
Okay.
Edsel. And I think that the house where he lived was right next to theirs. I think that they built on part of the farm. There was lilac, beautiful lilac bushes that was around the cellar, I think.
There was an old place where the buildings were across.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Papa sold his cows. I don't know how many that he had. And the next morning, when he got up, one of the cows was standing outside the barn door. He said that the dog chased it. She jumped the fence when she came home.
So the cow went back to the next town.
Mm-hmm. From Albion, South Freedom. See, I never went to Sunday school when I was a little girl, because I never had any place to go. I never went to Sunday school until I was 12 years old, except 2 or 3 times when I was visiting my grandmother. They had
North Palermo.
in North Palermo. There'd be somebody having a Sunday school in there.
Well, then many people went to that church.
No, because they didn't have any regular services after when I was 12. Must have stopped about the same time that my father and mother were married. I think must have been when they had the last services. My grandmother used to board the pastor if they had a single man. A lot of the time.
Just because she lived near the church.
Yeah, because she lived on the other corner.
And which church was that?
Methodist. That's what my mother belonged to. And my grandmother and my father used to come up to that church regular, I think, until they got married. And we stopped going to church.
What do you remember about high school? Anything? Anything stand out?
And so I had a good time. No, I enjoyed that. It was in school plays. I liked that. We always had a junior prize reading. We had put on a class play in my junior year, and then I was in the the play that we put on to raise money for the ball team, and we went down to China with that play, so we put that on twice. And then
Weren't you given the Grange Hall?
What?
The Grange Hall?
Yeah. No, Otto's Hall. I don't.
We used
Grange Hall for the
put
school
ours
play.
on in the Grange Hall.
Yeah, but I was in the Oddfellows Hall. I've been in a play twice, I think. There, see the Grange. The Grange would have put on that place in the Grange Hall, but they had community. Wellington, what's his name? Lynn Wellington. His wife lived out west somewhere, and one year she came out and she had a trunk full of Western clothes, and she wanted to coach a play. You know, or just anybody that wanted to volunteer. I've been in
community project.
just for the fun of it.
And you was in that?
I've been in 2 or 3 plays in the Oddfellows Hall.
What parts did you play? Do you recall?
No. But whenever there was ever a chance to be in one, I always volunteered. Then there was a woman was coming around one time, and I don't know who they were raising money for. She put on a musical, but there wasn't any sense to it. I never thought there was any sense to it, but I know I was in that one too. Supposed to be profit go to whatever group it was that did it.
We all storied out here.
Guess so.
No good stories about the neighbors. Everybody on the Bog Road.
There were 2 men that lived that used to come to Papa's store that couldn't talk.
This is at Freedom or Albion?
In Freedom. They couldn't talk, and they were called Dummy Seven and Dummy Margin. Isn't that awful? They didn't know it, I guess.
Well, they used to refer to the Richardson boys. It wasn't Billy Swift, it was Dummy Richardson.
Yeah, but they couldn't talk. These 2 couldn't.
Did they live together?
No, one lived in South Freedom, one lived in Palermo. The one in South Freedom married a foolish girl.
They're some real smart kids, huh?
I hope they didn't have any, but I have no idea. See, they didn't have any school buses at all. Or, of course, your dad went in wagon, used to, when he went to school. But everybody had to walk to South Freedom School. I think they must have built it what they thought was somewhere near the center of the school district, because they had to came in a wagon down to David School where I went first. The first day of school, when they had their recess in the forenoon. You have a recess in the forenoon?
Mm-hmm.
You get something out of your dinner bucket to eat? Eat lunch? I did too. I saw everybody taking out the dinner bucket. So I sat down and I ate my whole dinner. I didn't know that wasn't dinner time. When it came dinner time, I didn't have anything to eat, and I was very sad. Wouldn't you be? Everybody around you was eating, and you didn't have anything to eat? Because I didn't at all.
Your cousins wouldn't give you a bite?
Hmm?
Your Bradstreet cousins would give you a bite?
Probably I didn't let on what had happened. The teacher wasn't even there, so she went up to the Mrs. Davis got her lunch, went off and left those kids.
She went to somebody's house and ate?
She came, Mrs. Loveland. she came with a horse and buggy from Quaker Hill in Unison to teach school in South Suitland. Sometimes she'd get there at 8 o'clock, sometimes 9 o'clock, and sometimes 10 o'clock. School started whenever she got there. I don't know how long she taught. And she had used to work in a shoe factory, Lowell, Massachusetts. Is that what they had, a shoe factory?
It's a big textile town.
Uh-huh. Well, I remember the writing lessons that she'd give us. She'd write on the blackboard some statement about town, wherever it was, Factorytown, Massachusetts, where she used to work.
Lots of young girls went to the mills.
She'd write different sentences about that. I don't think she taught school very long.
Your mother never wanted to teach, or was didn't have the time?
Well, she couldn't have left my grandmother. My father wouldn't have wanted to have done that. He wanted somebody to stay with Grandma. Didn't want to leave her alone. I don't know why, but he didn't want her left alone. Harold Nutter taught down at Dave's school. I think that must have been the year before that I went. But he was courting Flossie Turner, and I remember making up a poem about little Harold Nutter sings for his supper. Something about little Flossie Turner, liking little Flossie Turner. He got to be a big man in Maine after that.
What do you mean by that?
Harold Nutter? Well, he was the head of the big and religious group. He was the head of the Kennebec Valley churches that was supported by big church in New York.
Waldo Larger Parish, 39?
Yeah. He was head of that, but was supported by this big church in New York. Calvary? I think his name it is now. But I know we got the paper one time, and we didn't know until then that was their mission. One of their mission projects was the Waldo Larger Parish. But he was the head of that for years and years and years. And after I graduated from high school, I worked around keeping house for people that the women get sick, or they'd call for me to come and help for a few days.
You never thought of getting more education?
Well, I thought of it. Anna Hikers wanted me to go to Farmington awful bad, but there didn't seem to be any money to do anything like that. So I just did housework.
Depression.
Mhm. I worked over the Hikers 2 or 3 times for $2 a week in my board. That's all they paid. And I got $4 at Besse's. I worked there from 4th of July to Christmas. And I didn't get Thanksgiving Day off. I didn't get Christmas off. I knew I wasn't going to, so I gave my notice. I cooked the Christmas dinner and washed the dishes, and then I went home. I was done there. I got $4 a week there. The girls that worked in Waterville got sick.
You ever work in a canning factory?
Yes, I substituted for, well, I don't substitute. I had my own job, too. Because when I got hit the first time, I was on the wait for the con shop.
Was this after you married?
Yeah. Yes, they was, when I took my driver's, the day that I applied for my driver's test. And that was the first year they had to take tests to drive. I had my list of rules to learn. It came in the morning mail, and I was supposed to be down there that day to take my test.
Down where?
Augusta, up on the hill where the airport is. And I studied it all the way down.
Sharon, people would like to see what you look like.
I missed one question. It was when two cars approach an intersection, which one has the right of way? And I didn't learn that one. But I passed my test. But I remembered. So I was on my way to work at the corn factory, and I was going through the village, and there was a truck pulling out from the post office. And I thought to myself, when two cars approach an intersection, the one on the right has the right of way. So I had the right of way. So I just kept right on going, and he didn't stop. And he put a dent in the fender of your dad's new car. The insurance paid for it, and we went out to Waterville and got it fixed. My grandmother and I went out and spent the day, got it fixed. But I remembered your grandfather recited a little poem to me that.
Grandfather Wiggins?
Yeah. What was it? He just as dead. He's dead right as he drove along. But he's just as dead as if he'd been dead wrong. That's what he recited to me.
That was very comforting, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, that was their pride and joy. That was a new car, and I felt terrible.
It belonged partly to Grandpa Wiggins, too, did it?
Well, it was his. Yeah, it was his car, really. It was his deal. The guy saw me coming, but he thought I'd stop. There was no reason why I should stop. He was the one supposed to stop. He was just pulling out in front of the post office.
His insurance paid?
Somebody's insurance paid. I don't know whose. But it was paid for, fortunately. Well, I had to work on the belt. That was throwing out pulling off the extra husk, I guess. It didn't get pulled off like that, but I like to run the husker belt.
I can remember going down there getting silage. With the cattle.
Yeah, you used to get lot. And then pea silage. You used to get that down there. Did they get that when you were?
It might have been pea silage. It seemed like they would cut it. Lines where they cut it off.
Well, that probably was because the corn silage, I think you had to have your trailer under the spout to get that.
Oh, you carried it away as it came out.
I think so.
The pea lines would sit there and pickle.
Yeah, pickle is right.
Nice smell.
Take them home and dump them in the barn floor. It was terrible smell, but they said it was awfully good for the cows. But you had to catch, don't you? Had to catch the silage, I'm very sure, from the spout. Just Stanley Gould used to send the little boy down in the morning with a trailer, tractor and trailer, before he went to school. I know. Leave it, and probably they'd move it up and load it and then move it away, I imagine.
You walk to school from your house in Elgin?
Yeah, usually.
Money out back.
Hmm?
Rabbit out back.
Oh. One year Papa caught weasels, trapped weasels in the stone wall up back of our house.
In South Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You trap anything else?
I think so. I remember us getting those. The only weasels I ever saw was those he caught. you know. After he got done using the low building
Just do it quick and get it over with.
for the woodsman, he had a spell for a while that he had dances every Saturday night down there in the lower building.
Many people come.
I think so.
Who provided music?
Well, just a few people around with a fiddler and Papa take his drum.
He played a drum?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
just a little one.
Where did he learn that?
Just down.
I don't recall ever seeing it.
Yeah, it was around. Well, I can't seem to think. I don't know whether he had anything. Oh, he must have had a piano down there. He must have borrowed a piano from somebody. Piano and a fiddle. Or two fiddlers.
So we'd have it every Saturday night, huh?
Yeah, it did for a while, but I was really young. As I said, that again was before Hilda was born. And so I wasn't 5. But I know that the women would come up to the house to comb their hair, and I know Mama wasn't too happy with the whole situation.
Was there a little alcohol up back too?
I don't believe so, because Papa wouldn't have been having it for his
Of course, it's prohibition time.
Well, he wouldn't have had anything like that going on at all. Papa wouldn't have any more. So they couldn't have been any drinking. I can't imagine what the floor could have been like. What kind of a floor for dancing?
There's a dance hall in your house now, then, wasn't there?
Yes, and Uncle Gus Wiggins said he had been there to dances when he was a boy. See, there was a ladder outside, stairs outside, staircase that went up to it. You didn't have to go through the house to get to it. Remember the door? There was doors on the end towards the village, Alvin Village.
Well, I remember when I was small, there was a lean-to garage on the end that maybe Grandpa Fuller built.
Oh, he must have.
He used to keep his car out there sometimes.
I don't remember that at all.
There was magazines and stuff that he got to take the waters off.
Yeah.
Put in there.
Well, there was a door on the end, and there was a staircase up there so they went up to get to it. And see, that was a good floor up there.
You walked in, there was a sort of stage there too.
Yeah, it was the stage for the orchestra.
You could go from the stage all the way into the second floor of your house.
Yeah, and in the next room, you open the door at the back of the stage, and the coat hooks was there, where that was their coat room. So that was a big hall. Well, that's what Uncle Gus said. He stopped in. They stopped in with him one time. His daughter that he lived with. And he said
that. That was in way back, but he was over 100 when he died, wasn't he?
Oh, yes, he died. He was 104 or 106 when he died.
About what year did he pass away?
Well,
1950?
Junior was... We went down there on his 100th birthday, I think it was, and Junior was a baby, if I remember correctly.
So we're talking about 1945.
So that would make him 150 about now, wouldn't it?
So he would as a youngster, if he went to dances, it was about the time of the Civil War.
Yeah. He was not in the war.
A bit too young.
I think.
Maybe a bit too young.
Well, I don't know that, but
Maybe not.
your grandfather said that he always was in very delicate health when he was young. It's funny, he lived to be so much over 100.
Well, there were ways of getting out of it if you could afford it.
Oh, yes, you could buy.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you know he married Grandma Sinclair's aunt, don't you? Sister to her mother.
There was some relation there.
Sister to her mother. Huh? called. He knew about the building there, and he said that, you know, down below the what we call the barn, the pipe came up out of the ground. Do you remember seeing that? The laser pipe came up.
The barn was gone forever.
He said, oh, that's one more. Well, he said that was just the stable where they kept the horses. Said that there was a big barn down near the stream. That must have been quite a place in its heyday. And that was the tavern.
And the stage stop.
And the stage stop there. If they had as big as that, and that was as big as a barn, if that was the stable, then they must have been a lot of horses that was kept there in exchange.
Was the stable attached to the regular building, main building?
No, it couldn't have been, because there's quite a little ways from that
You know,
to the
some
shed.
places had laws against that, so that a fire wouldn't take everything down.
No, it was farther away than that.
You know where the actual part of the tavern was in the house?
Well, I tried to figure it out. There was no bedrooms downstairs, apparently, and there wouldn't have been very many upstairs, but I guess that they just put up beds and the men slept in one room and the women in the other. I guess you didn't get individual rooms in those days. And you see there was the two big front rooms. And then there was one back room. That's all it would have been 3 bedrooms, plus there was a bedroom in the 3rd floor. But it was not finished off, but they might have used it. And then downstairs, you see, there was the 2 front rooms, which would have been for parlor. And in the middle, when we came there, there was this little long, narrow room where they put in the door, you know, on the end toward Albion. You know, there was a door there.
She used the pantry behind the stove?
No.
Oh, I know what you mean, off from the bedroom. Went from the bedroom to the
Yeah, a
floor.
little entryway, like, had a door that went outside. Yeah. That used to be a window and a sink underneath that, I think. And that was one room that went right straight through to opened off a kitchen there. And it had all shelves in there. And I guess that was where they kept the liquor. It was in there.
And there wasn't a full cellar in that house, was there?
No.
So it was something dug out down there.
Uh-huh.
Right? Where was all the land that went with that property? Mickey Mud and Strawberry Patch go with that?
I think it might have. I think probably it did. But still, I don't know that anybody ever farmed that.
But they had a large barn, unless they bought the hay.
That's right, too. You wouldn't have a big barn if you didn't have something put in it, would you? Well, maybe that whole field, they might have mowed all that. All of that might have been. I don't know what they did, because all I know about the barn is Merritt must have said they had a big barn. Now, Grandma Sinclair used to carry.
Sharon, you want to scoot along somewhere and do something else? Go ahead. You're excused.
She was a mail carrier from Palermo.
Grandma Sinclair was a mail carrier herself.
From Palermo to Freedom, and perhaps as far as Union. I don't know for sure.
Was that a political appointment then?
I have no idea, but I know that I presume it was Grandpa's job, but that she did a lot of it, because Mama said that she'd take her on the wagon seat beside of her and wrap a blanket around her so to keep her, and set on it so to keep her from falling.
Grandpa wasn't on the wagon.
What?
She probably drove because Grandpa wasn't on the wagon.
Her husband was a fine Christian gentleman. He didn't taste anything that he shouldn't.
Oh, you're talking about her first husband?
I'm talking about her first husband with Mama, because Mama was 14 when her father died.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And I know that She used to. She must had to go on to Branch Mills to get the mail, I guess. Unless somebody else went down there and got it,
There's
but I
no
think
post
she
office in North Plymouth?
no. No, but chances are, you know, the local mail might have been left there at Bowler's store for the local people.
When you were small, the road from North Plymouth went down across to where Brockway's live now? There used to be a road that went there?
It had been discontinued. In fact, I think they fought every year about that road. But she came out over there by where they've changed the road now, the Hutchins place, I believe it was. And do you remember that desk that Papa had? And he left it. It was in the store. He set it outside somewhere and got rained on and got pretty much ruined. But it was what they had to keep the mail over there at Hutchins. She had to leave mail and pick up mail there.
You see that road was discontinued by Plymouth or by Albion?
The Albion end was discontinued. But do you know where Hutchins Corner was? That's why they discontinued the road and set it over. The new road goes straight now to go to North Palermo. But it used to come out from Palermo right there at Hutchins Corner. And that was the road that she came up with her mail. And how far she went with it, I don't know. Whether she went clear to Unity or not.
I know when I was a kid, you could still get through from Marks
yeah.
by Jack Mails to Brockway. So it was abandoned, even though you could still drive down through there. And I guess that other road must have connected in there somewhere.
Yeah. I have no idea how long she carried mail, or Grandpa carried mail. But I know she did, because Mama told about riding with her. That would have taken a long time with horse and wagon.
What did her grandfather do? Her father, actually. Right?
Her father?
Her father carried mail.
Farmer, I suppose.
Right. Her father carried mail, or her grandpa.
Her father. It's her father's job. I don't know what people lived on those days. You see, his father was killed in the Civil War when he was 14 months old.
Which made it pretty tough for...
Right. For his widow.
Yeah.
Pat was taking pictures of all the ancestral homes around one summer, and she stopped up at North Palermo, and she went to the door and told him she'd like to take a picture of the house. That was where her mother and father were both born, and the Studler's living there now, I guess. And he said, well, he was glad to see somebody that knew something about the place. He said that the door, the cellar door, had a date on it. It was way, way back. I can't remember the date it was at all. And so he thought that gave him some idea about the house, you know. And I remember hearing my grandmother say that cellar door was rescued from the house that burned down the road a ways. So the house wasn't as old as the cellar door was. Too bad the old brick house burned. That was built for the first wood for freedom.
Was it rebuilt?
No, there's a new house there now. But the old brick house, the original house, was there. When we moved there to Albion. Papa never fill up with gas until he had to. And he's backed up Carr's Hill more than once. Because he didn't have gas so
Carr's Hill.
Go uphill.
The hill to Freedom, to North Palermo.
To North Palermo when he come up, or take us up to come get us. Didn't have gas enough, so he'd turn around and back up.
Well, you could get halfway home coasting, couldn't you?
Yeah.
If you could once get up there.
reply that he was so anxious for Carlton to carry a gas can with him so he wouldn't get out of gas on the road.
Did he ever sell gas?
Papa?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I pumped a lot of gas
Was the tanks on the ground or above ground?
on the ground. Yeah, somebody, I guess, was Junior was saying a while ago, those tanks are still there.
They might still be.
Yeah.
Maybe a few gallons left in them.
They've never been dug out. I'm sure.
Maybe I do. Is it the Country Island? You know what happened to the Coke sign is out there, don't you? See Carl's original log cabin over there.
Is that right?
Used it to put around behind the stove. The heat.
Reflector?
Yeah, you remember there used to be Coke sign then where the old stove was?
No.
I suppose if it's in good shape, you could pry it off the wall and sell it now. I can remember there used to be an orange press sign on the building up there, remember that?
No, I don't.
Were you all done reminiscing for a while?
Well, I can tell you about the night we got married.
Sure, go ahead.
Saturday night, the couple was all dressed up to go over to the hog raffle.
The what?
The hog raffle.
What's a hog wrestle?
The dance over on Quimby Road.
He was the bouncer?
He was the bouncer. And I had no idea when he dressed that morning whether he'd be present at the wedding or not.
You know
He didn't think anybody was good enough to marry his daughter.
Oh.
So I had no idea whether he'd be there. He didn't want anybody to know that we were getting married outside of the family because your dad was especially afraid of what they call chivalry or something like that. And you never knew whether one of you was going to get kidnapped or what's going to happen. So they weren't having any church weddings anyway. Everybody got married at home. And so the only people that knew anything about it was just the close families. And the pastor, Mr. Sawyer, took his car over to Matt Ruth's and left it. They knew about it. And so he left it there, and I guess that Gladys and Willis probably went down on the border road and rode up with Raymond and Ruby. And so I was supposed to tend store, Papa being dressed up, because they'd known with him all dressed up what was going on if anybody came to the store. He didn't have very many customers anyway, but I was going to tend the store until the last minute. So Uncle Oscar came over. He was the only person, but he just came over and he just sat and talked, and he knew Papa hadn't left. I suppose he kept waiting, expecting he to come out so we could visit with him for a while before he went over to the dance. And he just stayed and stayed and stayed. And I didn't get a chance to get in and get dressed until about half an hour before I was supposed to get married. I didn't have very much time.
Did you buy a wedding dress?
No, I made it. Blue lace. And my bouquet was beautiful. My mother-in-law made it with rose geraniums. A rose geranium was apparently loaded with blossoms. She made a beautiful bouquet for me.
Must have a strong smell, didn't it, geranium?
No.
No?
No, the rose geranium blossom didn't. Now, the leaves might have, but the blossoms didn't. It was a beautiful bouquet. So, I didn't have a chance like anyone's supposed to really have time to get ready.